Porsche.
Oh yeah, man, I love classic Porsches. Those liquid-cooled V8s in the front, automatic transmissions, rear sun visors.
Rear sun visors.
All 219 horsepower.
That's a lot of horsepower.
You know, classic Porsche stuff. When you think of Porsches, you probably think of this. The legendary 911. For 57 years, this epic automobile has not only defined the Porsche brand, but what a sports car is and should be. So it might surprise you to learn that in the 70s, they almost stopped making the 911 because they thought it was as good as it was gonna get.
You make me want to be a better man.
And you might be even more surprised to learn that the car that they planned on replacing it with was this front engine cruiser, more at home on the highways of America than the corners of the Nürburgring. Well, today we're going to tell the story of the absurd Porsche that almost tanked the entire company, the reason behind its development, and how although it was initially a sales flop, Germany's Corvette went on to define an entire decade and influence Porsche's future forever. We're also going to talk to a guy who owns a few Porsches of his own.
This is everything you need to know to get up to speed on the Porsche 928.
A big thanks to carparts.com for sponsoring today's video. I am so excited to finally be back at a NASCAR race. Now, my cousin Clumsy Carl really wanted to come, but he couldn't make it because his car is always broken, because he never takes my advice. Come on, please start. Michael's counting on me. And boy, is he gonna be double bummed when he learns that his favorite driver, Michael McDowell, is in this ad with me.
Sorry to hear about your car, Clumsy Carl.
I've gotta make it, no matter what it takes. Carparts.com is your one-stop shop for all collision, maintenance, and repair parts. Now, who said you have to sacrifice quality for reasonable prices?
They provide a quick and smart way to find what you want whenever you want, no matter what you drive.
Even bumpers.
Yeah, even bumpers. Bumpers.
Oh, bumpers. So whether you need new brakes, headlights, or even a new bumper, carparts.com will get your vehicle looking good and running like new no matter what you drive.
Well,
okay, technically not the car that you drive. Right. So head on over to carparts.com today or just click the link in the description. And now, off to the races.
what do you think? You think Clumsy Carl will make it?
Oh no, I do not at all. I'm gonna make it. 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 By the early 70s, Porsche had secured their place as producers of some of the finest sports coupes ever to grace this fat green earth. Starting with the 356 and continuing with the car that single-handedly defined the brand for decades to come, the 911. Throughout the 60s, this rear-engined, rear-wheel drive coupe became the benchmark for sporty European drivers' cars. The air-cooled Pancake 6 produced between 130 and 190 buff horses, which for a car that weighed just a bit over 2,000 pounds meant that it was fun to huck around, but also really, really scary at times. The combination of short wheelbase and ample power centered over the rear wheels meant that the 911 took a lot of skill to drive at the limit. I'm talking about a little thing called oversteer.
So a lot of people get into a 911 first-time drivers. The front is really, really light, and the rear tends to always sort of move. So at certain speeds, the cars do become twitchy. And, a lot of these cars sort of, went off the road backwards.
Now, despite all of its pitfalls, the 911 was iconic and became inseparable from its badge daddy. With this car, Porsche etched out a deep groove in the market and found a really loyal fan base that just gobbled up any 911 that they threw at them. But sometimes, no matter how good you are at YouTube or whatever, your parents don't notice. Dad. By the time the disco decade rolled around, 911 sales were drying up quicker than my weenuses in the winter, with only minor changes done to the size of the engine and a few other upgrades. Managing director of Porsche AG, Ernst Furman, who is an awesome guy. We found so many sick quotes by this dude. Ernst Furman was worried that the car was about as good as it was gonna get, which is insane to think about.
I mean, that's the crazy thing. You said it right there. At the time, engineers thought the 911 had reached its pinnacle within, let's call it, 12 years of production. But as we know, 57 years later of continued production, the 911 is faster than it's ever been.
In Furman's mind, the 911 was dying a slow death. It was expensive and labor-intensive to build. With sales drying up, the only means for survival for the company was to find a replacement and to find one quickly. Porsche specifically wanted to sell more cars in the US. Their new 914 would cover the entry-level 4-cylinder sector, but Porsche still needed a halo car to showcase the cream of what the Stuttgart Stallion could offer. You know, that luscious, silky, thick horse cream. Pumphrey's horse cream, only available at donutmedia.com. Ferdinand Porsche Jr., Ferry, if you're nasty, was looking to incorporate a luxury grand touring car into the lineup to compete with brands like Mercedes and BMW. They already had a leg up on Porsche with cars like the first Gen 5 series and the W116. They were both outselling Porsche in the States, which, like I said before, was Porsche's target market. So the company decided that for them to survive in the 80s and beyond, they needed to design a luxury grand touring car with a front engine layout that allowed them enough room to fit a catalytic converter. For any other luxury car manufacturer at the time, this would not be a big deal. Front engine, rear-wheel drive? Oh yeah, I think we can do that. You mean doing what we always do? Oh yeah, I think we can do that. Oh yeah, one bear sounds nice. But for a company that gained notoriety by producing small rear-engine baby rocket boys, this was risky business. Despite the inherent risk of doing something off-brand, Ferry Porsche ordered the design of this new luxury Grand Tour in 1971, and with its debut, Porsche finally planned to say goodbye to the outdated 911. Not only would this car be different, it would be the first Porsche made that would be designed from the ground up. Every other car that they had done so far was derived from an already existing model. The 356 came from the Volkswagen Beetle, the 911 came from the 356, the 914 was designed with VW as a replacement for the Carbon Ghia. So literally when people say that 911s are just 6-cylinder Beetles, or call them like Uber Beetles, they're not just being a troll, that's literally how the car started. Now with nothing holding them back, they could do whatever they wanted as far as powertrain choices, design, and new technology without having to worry about fitting into any existing framework. And the choices that they ended up making for the 928 were interesting. Some were brilliant, and some were just like, what? There was a lot of internal debate at Porsche as what should power this new GT car. The engineers won out in the end, as they always do. Jeremiah gets the front seat every time. So they decided to use their choice, an aluminum 5-liter V8 making 302 sweet, creamy horsepower. This new liquid-cooled V8, dubbed the M28, was different from the air-cooled flat sixes Porsche was known for, so a lot of time was spent making it reliable. Engineers decided to make the bore spacing, aka the space between the cylinders, extra thick. This extra space between cylinders on the M28 prevented the engine block from overheating, but it did decrease the displacement from 5 liters to 4.5. Not a huge deal in the grand scheme of things, but it did reduce overall horsepower from 302 to 240. Sounds like my bench max. Which I want to point out is still pretty good for like the gas crisis era. Now, a traditional mid-mounted transmission would have thrown off the balance of the 928, so engineers opted for a transaxle on the rear to help it achieve a perfect 50-50 weight distribution. Most 911s were manual, aside from a few Sportmatic equipped models, so Porsche chose a 3-speed Mercedes-sourced automatic transmission for the 928, which would later get upgraded to a 4-speed. It did come with the option of a 5-speed dog-legged manual, but more than 80% of all 928s ever sold were automatic. As we said before, one of the biggest problems Porsche faced with the 911 was oversteer. So Porsche was like, we'll have no more of that. They lengthened the wheelbase from 87 to 98 inches, put independent suspension on all 4 corners, and developed what they called the Weissach axle, named after the small town outside of Stuttgart that Porsche R&D calls home. Now all this Weissach axle stuff is a little above my pay grade, if I'm being honest. So I'm gonna let Jeremiah explain it.
Thank you, James. Basically, with a setup like the 911, when the car decelerates, the rear trailing arm pivots towards the rear relative to the chassis, and that results in the wheels going toe out. Now this can destabilize the rear end and send it spinning out, which is what 911s of that era were known for. The Weissach axle has a metal linkage. When the car decelerates, the link forces the wheels to go toe in instead of toe out, which takes care of our little oversteer problem. It's what's considered a passive steering system, and it really helps the car maintain stability through the most intense part of a turn by giving it a super high level of lateral grip and improved stability.
Thanks, Jer. Now back to me. Thanks, me. Now that its bones and heart were taken care of, it was finally time to focus on the beautiful skin. The body of the 928 was designed by Wolfgang Mobius, which sounds like a symphony, under the tutelage of Anatole Tony Lapine, who also designed the Corvette Stingray in the 1960s. If you look at these two cars side by side, it's no wonder why the 928 got the nickname Gemini's Corvette. Now, it took some time for the design team to convince the board at Porsche to go with this body design. The board thought they were going gorillas. It was wildly different than anything they'd ever done, but the designers insisted that this look was provocative and it'll get people going, and eventually they convinced everyone in the room that it was a very good idea. The era of the wedge car was in full swing by the mid-70s, and the design of the 928 fit perfectly with the trend. The aluminum over steel body construction, which was novel for the time, allowed for these long, swoopy lines. The polyurethane bumpers were integrated into the body to achieve a sleek, aerodynamic look. Nowadays, tons of cars have this style bumper, but back when it came out, it was super unique. It was so futuristic at the time that it doesn't even look dated even today. But the piece de resistance of the Porsche 928, and probably my favorite part of this car, were the pop-up up and down headlights. When they're down, the lights are visible pointing up, which helps the 928 maintain that classic Porsche front end. Also, looks like a freaking shark, which is the third coolest animal. And when they pop up, oh boy, suddenly the 928 is transformed into the sickest snail you've ever seen. Sorry, Gary, SpongeBob's dead. And we gotta use his body to clean this new 928. Porsche knew the risk that they were taking with this car, but they were too far along to just pull the plug. 6 years of research and development led to this moment. Would people accept the 928 as a replacement for the 911, or would it completely tank the company? Find out right now. The 928 debuted at the 1977 Geneva Motor Show, exactly 41 years before I debuted at the Geneva Motor Show. People took notice of me strolling around in my fancy turtleneck. A similar thing could be said for the 928. Crowds flocked to the Porsche exhibit to gawk at the new front-engine V8 Porsche. Car enthusiasts marvel at the sleek design, the shark-like bumpers, the plush yet wild interior. BMW and Mercedes could only look on as Porsche was winning over all of their customers. They are marveling at it. I mean, can you blame them? It's marvelous. Yeah, Bombay sounds good. Speaking of interior, the 928 had its fair share of what Doug DeMuro would call this is brazy, dog. First off, the interior gauge cluster and the steering wheel moved as a single unit when the wheel was adjusted to make sure that all of the gauges could be read despite where it was adjusted. And because it was the 70s, the seats came in a variety of groovy swatches, including the mesmerizing checkerboard Pasha, tartan, even pinstripes and paisleys. But one of the weirdest things in the 928 has to be its rear sun visors. They're like no sun visor that you've ever seen.
The rear sun visors are nuts. If you manage to squeeze in the back, like I was saying, this is a lot of glass, a lot of greenhouse. So those rear sun visors, you know, I guess they come in handy. It's a real quirky design to it because it's almost right in your face when you look at it.
But for all the new stuff in the 928's interior, it was the new center console design that was actually the most super high tech for the time. Don't take it from me.
Now there's that center console that I was talking about. There's nothing like that in a Porsche that came before. But you look at that, every Porsche today seems to have a similar inspired center console transmission tunnel. The center console that's in the 928, it's integrated. That is in every 911 today. Everything from the Panamera to the Macan to obviously, the Cayenne has that same center console.
Like Magnus said, this was the first time that Porsche had an integrated center console. The move made sense for a Grand Tour, and it was a hit. I mean, your arm's got to go somewhere. Technology. Overall, people loved the 928 when it debuted. It even won the European Car of the Year, not Sports Car of the Year, Car of the Year in 1978. That's the first year that a sports car won that title, beating out the BMW 7 Series and the Ford Granada. One of the things that made the 928 so good was that 50-50 weight distribution that I mentioned earlier. Porsche developed this car to compete with BMW and Mercedes, but the 928 actually handled better than anything in their own lineup. In turns where the 911 would have been hard to control, the 928 stayed super planted. The powerful V8 could blast through apexes no problem without getting fishy. The only thing that was really holding this car back was the price tag. At $26,000, which is about $103,000 today, it wasn't cheap. Its base price was higher than the top-end 911, but it was half the price of the car it was competing against, the Mercedes S-Class, which sold for an insane $50,000 by the end of the 70s. That's $200,000 now, which is like depressing. And just proves that money is stupid and fake. The 928 didn't quite sell as well as Porsche had wanted, but the hype alone surrounding this car was enough for them to keep producing it. And Porsche had a little help from a little town called Hollywood. By the early 80s, Porsche was selling small numbers of the 928, mostly to rich playboys, rich athletes, and other rich celebrities. So it was pretty natural when the 928 started showing up in TV shows and movies like Scarface and Weird Science.
Also, Bruce Wayne drives one in Frank Miller's Batman Year One comic book.
But one movie where this car was basically the star was the 1983 Tom Cruise classic, Risky Business. Now this movie centers around a teenager who escorts prostitutes around in his parents' gold Porsche 928, culminating in the car rolling off a dock into the water. Oh, come on, spoiler alert! The movie's 37 years old. Oh, so about like half as old as you? What? Spoiler alert. What? Speaking of spoilers, the look of the 928 continued to evolve over the course of its life. And even though this car was essentially designed for the US market, Europe obviously got all the cool versions first, while we were just sitting here twiddling our red, white, and blue thumbs. One of the first updates to the 928 was a front and rear spoiler, as well as wider tires for the 1980 model. The little black ducktail broke up the bulbous rear end and gave the car a sportier look. The 928S, as it was called, got a bigger 4.7-liter V8, which now made 300 horsepower. The 928S finally made its way across the Atlantic to America in 1984 with a bunch of cool upgrades like Bosch anti-lock brakes, an extra gear for the automatic, a shorter shifter, and a new 5-liter 32-valve V8, albeit with power reduced to 228 horsepower. But the new engine was definitely an upgrade, and paired with the new transmission, the 928 now had a top speed of over 155 miles per hour. Do Germans make meatballs? Because if they do, this is a spicy German meatball. Also in 1984, Porsche made a special one-off to celebrate the 75th birthday of Ferry Porsche called the 942. It had a longer wheelbase and a different roof. There was actually a second one made for the president of the American Sunroof Corporation, who helped make the 944 cabriolets. That's a nice gift. They must have been homies. 1987 saw the arrival of the 928 S4. Americans finally got this hot version with new choice upgrades like a sick-ass spoiler, new bumpers, beefier internals, including new cam, new heads, which upped the power all the way to 360, finally! Finally, 316 horsepower. Enthusiasts still had the manual option with the GT package. Now, a year before this S4 made its debut in the States, a group of engineers from Porsche took one of them to the Bonneville Salt Flats. The director of Porsche Motorsport North America and IMSA champion Al Holbert would be behind the wheel as they attempted to break the record for fastest land speed in a stock, naturally aspirated production car. After only a few attempts, they did just that. The 5-speed 928 S4 made it to 171.9 miles per hour with ease.
The car is very stable. I should have turned the radio on because it's so quiet. There's no noise. Pretty nifty.
Later, the S4 would clock an unofficial 180 miles per hour. For a car that had been out for a full decade, it's clear that this thing was only getting better as time went on, like a fine 3-liter of aged Fago. But the success of the 928 was not a good barometer for how badly things were going at Porsche. Despite all the amazing cars they produced during this time, the early 80s were not kind to the company, and they continued to struggle to keep their head above water. In 1981, Porsche posted a profit of $4.5 million total, which is around $15 million today. For a car company, that's really bad. Like, that's barely enough to keep the lights on. Like, literally. Their light bill is probably like $15 million. That same year, Peter Schutz replaced Ernst Fuhrmann and decided that the 928 and 911 should exist side by side, and that Porsche should continue to manufacture the 911 instead of killing it off. Probably a very, very good decision. The 928 and the 911 were two totally different classes of cars, and we all know how well the 911 has evolved since the 80s. Imagine a world where Porsche didn't make the 911. As the 928 kept chugging into its third decade of existence, it hadn't even reached its final form. The 928 GTS debuted in 1993 with a bored-out 5.4-liter 32-valve V8, making an impressive 345 horsepower. They sent just over 400 of these to the States, which makes them one of the most sought-after 928s out there. And just 2 years later, in 1995, they axed the car altogether, ending an impressive 18-year, one-generation run. The reason? Well, it could have been because the 928 GTS cost over $100,000, 3 times the price of a Corvette at the time, but more likely is that it was just too expensive to keep producing such an old model. Plus, Porsche needed to focus all their energy on the newest generation 911, the 993, and they were already developing the Boxster. The 928 was definitely the black sheep of the Porsche family for a while. It wasn't conventional in any sense, and it seemed to defy everything the company stood for. But it proved that Porsche engineering wasn't confined to any one engine layout, any one drivetrain, any one body type. We won't see a new 928 anytime soon, but its DNA obviously lives on in every Porsche built since then. The Weissach axle, which can be found in the GT3 RS and basically every modern Porsche. I mean, look at a Panamera. It's a freaking 4-door 928. And of course, that center console, which can be found in every Porsche nowadays. It's easy to write this car off as a failure, but over the course of its production run, Porsche sold over 60,000 of them, which is a lot for a boutique car company. And that means that this is one Porsche you can still find for pretty cheap. But the price has been going up recently because people are making videos about them, and Magnus Walker bought some. And speaking of Magnus, I want to extend like a huge thank you from me and the rest of the team. Without his help, this video wouldn't be anywhere near what it was. A super nice guy, amazing enthusiast. If you want to see his amazing Porsche collection, check out his Instagram at Magnus Walker. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at James Pumphrey. Follow Donut on everything at Donut Media. You want to buy a shirt or some horse cream, go to donutmedia.com. Horse cream isn't a real product yet, but if you guys want us to make some horse cream, while we were just shooting this, I came up with some ideas of what that could be. So hit us up in the comments. That's how Buff Horses happened. Just let us know you want horse cream, you want horse cream, we want horse cream, we want horse cream. Hashtag we want horse cream. Hashtag we want horse cream. And we will make horse cream. All right, thank you. It's good to be back. I love you.